Mm. Okay, sorry, it seems that you seem to be catching me at the wrong times today, just when I'm chilling out. But no worries, it's fine. I'll make time for you. As I mentioned, the process of metabolism takes chemical energy collected from the environment and uses it for biosynthesis, maintenance, and external work. But of course, the food that animals eat doesn't just magically appear as energy in the system. It's created through aerobic catabolism in 4 separate steps: glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, electron transport, and oxidative phosphorylation. Oh no! I can pretty much hear you say right now, I didn't take this course to memorize different metabolic pathways. Relax. I'm not going to get you to memorize any of these things. The purpose of bringing them up is to identify that these are the main processes where carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins are oxidized to create ATP. And ATP is what powers all the functions in animal bodies. All animals function in this way, and these metabolic pathways create all the energy that animals use. I want you to understand that these are physiological systems that follow a very specific set of rules to create energy, and these rules are bound by chemical reactions. This is important to understand because they can give us insight into how biological systems function and why there is variation between individuals. But that's something that we'll get into the third part of this lecture, when I give you an example from my own research. For now, let's get back to discussing metabolism. An animal's metabolic rate is the rate at which it converts chemical energy into heat and external work. Scientists usually measure metabolic rate at 2 different periods: during resting, called the resting metabolic rate, and during activity, called the active or maximal metabolic rate. Like I mentioned in the previous talk, smaller-bodied organisms tend to have a higher weight-specific metabolic rate than larger individuals. And that's why a mouse has a resting metabolic rate that's 20 times that of an elephant's. The resting metabolic rate is how much energy an animal uses at rest. Most commonly, this is measured through oxygen consumption. Now, you can imagine that at rest, an animal is using much less energy than when it's active. And you can also imagine that there may be periods of time, like in winter where food is scarce, where animals may really lower their metabolic rate to be able to survive the period where food is scarce. If you're thinking about hibernating animals at this point, good. That's exactly what you should be thinking about. And hopefully now you can start to see that the environment can shape the physiology of an organism. The other aspect I mentioned was the active or maximal metabolic rate. The active rate is how much energy animals consume when they are active, and the extreme is their maximal rate, how much they consume when they are performing at their upper threshold. An animal's maximal metabolic rate is also measured by the maximum amount of oxygen it can consume. So measuring the maximum rate is significant because it can tell us the maximum rate at which an animal can sustain their performance or exercise. It allows us to understand how much an organism can handle. Again, this will become relevant in the example in the third part of this lecture. If we compare the oxygen consumption between different phylogenetic groups, we generally see a pattern where mammals and birds have a maximal metabolic rate about an order of magnitude that of fish, amphibians, and reptiles. Hint, take a look at the scale of these y-axes here to really notice the difference. Once again, you can imagine how the ecological differences that these groups encounter could affect their physiology. And finally, the last thing I want to tell you about physiology and metabolic rates specifically is that it's not something that stays constant within an animal's life. Age and sex can affect metabolic rates, as can things like exercise and training. In fact, there's evidence that exercise early in life can prime the system to function better later in life. And if that doesn't get you to exercise, well, then nothing will.